Yeah, I'm Philippe Peltier-Baribeau. You can call me Phil from Sweet Bandit Studios here in Quebec City. I'm one of the co-studio head, and I'm also a designer on Deceiving.
First off, thank you for being a part of our E6 coverage. E6 here at Shacknews. Twice your recommended month of gaming ease, and this is a very interesting game because essentially what we've got here is like a hide in plain sight I wouldn't say cops and robbers, but sort of like a track down the your target type thing. And like, can you just take us into like the whole spiel of what Deceive Inc. has for players?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you've said, the basic idea is we wanted to go with kind of the feel of spy movies and try to translate that in a multiplayer experience. The idea was really to capture, like you said, a bit of that tension of being hidden in plain sight. Like you've got a bunch of NPCs roaming around the level. Players play as secret agents that can disguise themselves as any NPC. So you can change your appearance to anyone that you see in the level and take that appearance, and you can swap anytime you just walk up to someone and you can take that appearance. Of course, switching appearances is pretty suspicious, so you have to be careful of when you do that. And the idea is that everyone's a spy, everyone is working against each other to get an objective that is kind of a precious object in the map. So you try to advance toward that objective together, and the idea is that the level itself funnels you into that vault, that secure vault, and confrontation gets happen more often. You get into fights with other spies, and the idea is that you have this disguise that you have, but as soon as you fire your weapon or get shot, it breaks disguise. You're revealed as a spy, and it's pretty clear that you're a player, and you have to kind of hide to recover that disguise. So the idea is really playing with the notion of being undercover as a mechanic, and just that you can lose your cover, have fights because of that, and then you may want to try and get back into cover and get back into the action. Um, the kind of hide and seek dynamic of it, I think that's one of the things we wanted to do is make a game that uses that dynamic, but where everyone is both the hunter and the hunted, in the sense that everyone can be a danger to someone else, and everyone is trying to hide and keep low profile. You have to know when to take actions and when to take risks, and play around that kind of a bit of social stealth of looking like an NPC with the other, and taking the right moment to pounce and eliminate the competition.
Absolutely, and there's interesting precedent for this game because it's it's not like games like Among Us, but it is like that similar idea where you don't know who you can trust, you don't know who's you're in a world of NPCs and you don't know which one is going to be your target or someone hunting you. We've seen similar mechanics in the likes of games like Assassin's Creed's multiplayer, and I want to ask, how does Deceive Inc. like differentiate itself and set itself apart from things that have sort of done something similar before?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a few angles to that. I think a lot of the experiences that, like for example, Assassin's Creed, I think it's really an interesting kind of comparison in that sense. It's very focused on just eliminating someone else. The ship is very similar to that in that sense also, in that you have a specific, this player is my target, you want to take them out. I think the action in these games is less important than just blending in. Once you get to that player, the action of taking them out is mostly in Assassin's Creed, like pressing a button and you assassinate them. So where we differentiate ourselves, I think, first, killing other players is not the goal. It can be a means to an end. So eliminating other spies can reduce the competition as you get toward the objective. The idea is you want to get the objective and get to extraction and leave the premises with that objective. So you could win without killing anyone else if you're super stealthy, you play with gadgets, you're very clever in getting people to third party each other as you escape from fights. You could do that. The idea is that you can be more of a very manipulative person, get players to fight each other, and you step out of that. And you can also be very aggressive if that's something you prefer. And I think the other aspect about that is that the fights themselves and the execution are much more rooted in action games. So as you blow your cover, as you get into a fight, you have those gadgets that you can use. You've got the spy abilities that you can lean on. Some spies are more geared toward fighting. Some spies are more geared to our investigation, finding other spies. Some spies are very evasive and very hard to pin down. So you've got kind of that how you want to play and try some different things in this kind of spy sandbox against other players. And I think the combat itself is much more involved in that you do have shooting mechanics, you have gadgets that you can deploy that can help you in fights, and you have more of that mechanically, I think, advanced kind of combat with a higher skill ceiling for people that get into a fight. But the important thing for us is that being stealthy and taking that fight at the right moment and being able to kind of dictate when that fight happens gives you a big edge. So it's kind of playing with that idea that there is that kind of stealth, more subtle tension building moment, and then you decide to pick a fight. It goes into high gear, into this kind of high action, high octane fight, and then you want to break away from that fight and get back into cover to protect yourself from third parties that could come in there. So I think that's really where it differentiates. I think the action side of it is very fresh in that kind of game. It's not something that many games lean on kind of that social stealth kind of approach. So I think that's where we have most of our differences.
And it's very interesting, too, because you've got different spies that have different skill sets, they have a unique weapon, and there are a whole bunch of different tools that they can basically build a loadout with. And, like, how challenging has it been to create these spies, build their identities, and also build, like, balance where no one spy just has a build that just completely does the rest?
Incredibly difficult, I think is the basic answer. It's super difficult. I think one of the things that makes it super challenging for a game like ours is that there are things that have a very specific and easy to quantify effect on balance, like having a strong weapon. Like this weapon deals a lot of damage, or it's very accurate. This is something that you can really easily quantify in some ways, and that there is that much DPS, that kind of stuff. When you get into abilities that are much more like information based and knowing that someone was there and that you're following someone and that kind of stuff, it gets much more intangible in a balancing sense. Like, how oppressive is this that I can kind of sniff the tracks that you left behind and try to find you. And I think that's one of the big challenges that we had to contend with, like just building these kits together. That this spy is much more combat oriented, might be a bit more simple to play for basic players, but how do we get that Deceive Inc. kind of, how do we get that spy flavor even in a kit that's more kind of closer to games that people play normally? And then on the completely other side, how do we get kits that are completely unique to our game, that makes that you won't see in any other game, and that plays very close to kind of the stealth elements, the misdirection elements, and how strong is that? How do you quantify that those elements are strong in a balancing sense? So I think that's the biggest challenge, is really just the entire sandbox of stuff that you can do. We really want it to be interactive. Talked a bit about the loadouts. Like, the gadgets themselves are not tied to the spies. The spies got their ability, and then you choose which gadgets you bring which spy. So there's kind of that a bit of build making that you can do by mixing those things together and changing your approaches. So of course it complexifies balancing also in that sense, in that we must make sure that this spy with this gadget is not too oppressive compared to this spy with this gadget. So yeah, it's quite complicated. I think it adds some complexities, but I think it's also kind of the fun of it is that we've really tried to go with kind of the systemic approach on a lot of those gadgets, in just that if you think it can do that, it should probably do that in all situations. And one example of that is that we've got the holo mimic gadgets that allow you to scan pieces of furnitures around level and disguise yourself as those furnitures. And we started with that as a kind of the scope of it was much more limited. Like, okay, you can scan this and that, and we had a very specific feedback on those furniture. But the more the game has advanced, we were like, hey, we need to be able to scan this one and this one and this one. And it just kind of built up where, okay, when you have it in your hand, you should almost always in every scene have something in view that can be scanned and used with it, so that you never have a question of, why is this not scannable? So it expanded quite a lot. It adds a lot of complexity to have kind of that systemic approach. But I think that's what we are trying to gun for, is that if you think about something with that gadget, it should probably work and have that interaction that's interesting with the NPCs or the level itself or the objects.
What inspired the look, the style, and the approach of Deceive Inc.?
So I think, yeah, I mean, James Bond, quite obviously it did. One thing we wanted to do is not bill ourselves in kind of the more modern spy movies. I think we wanted to go more with the campy fun of movies from the past, having kind of the ridiculous gadgets that can do whatever we need them to do for gameplay that feels fun and interesting, but also having kind of that style and that look that's really heavily into the 70s. So we've looked, of course, Roger Moore's James Bond was something that we found really interesting, like just the situations, the places he gets himself into. That's always very fun. But we looked at very broadly, I think, at 70s kind of media from different kind of characters. We didn't want to stick ourselves only in kind of the very basic spy fantasy, but we wanted to reach a bit broader. The idea is that the agents employed by Deceiving are not all from a spy background, but they are now spies. So, for example, we've got Larsin, which is kind of that gentleman thief, very deeply in the fantasy of Arsène Lupin, as you can imagine. And he's kind of that French gentleman thief that is the best at what he does, at stealing stuff from people, and that also reflects itself in his toolkit. So we went pretty large. We wanted to get some of that 70s influence as much in the music as in the look. But one thing that we landed on later on is that we wanted to not be set in the 70s, but have 70s influences. So the game is kind of in that modern or future or near future kind of era, but with 70s influences everywhere. Like if the 70s were put forward into kind of our time, or a bit farther in the future with technology that we don't quite have yet, but just keep all those 70s influence, the fashion, the look, the big computers with the round kind of back to it, the colors themselves. Really wanted to have kind of a very colorful, vibrant world in that front. And of course, just the 70s music, we love it, and we wanted to get that kind of funky beat when you get into a fight and that kind of stuff. So we really went, I think, far and wide from that basic kind of, we want the spy fantasy and that spy tension, and then kind of just go and get more influences from around for the different spies, their look, even going to detective fantasy for one of our characters that's more kind of investigation based, and tying it all together in that kind of organization that is Deceiving, that kind of hires people from different backgrounds, which allows us to tie all these skill sets together.
And it's very interesting because not only is it PvP in the fact that you're going against other spies and you need to get to like the objective first and get out before the others can catch you, but like the environments themselves also present a number of challenges. Like you have to disguise yourself to gain access to restricted areas, or like you'll actually arouse the suspicion of other guards. How did you go about building this sort of, I would say, PvPvE setup?
Yeah, I think it really went from the basics of the fantasy itself. So from the very start, one thing we wanted to have kind of that spy movie tension, and so when we looked at it, is what builds that tension, what makes it work. And the idea was, okay, what works to have that spy feeling and feeling that you are undercover is that you need to have suspicion on other players, and you can't be right all the time. It needs to be a majority of NPCs, and then kind of in between that majority, that sea of NPC, there are some people in there that are going to take kind of risky actions that if you spot them, you can have a pretty good idea that they are a player. So as we built that, we needed ways to make people stand out as being players. So the way we did that is that we needed kind of restricted areas, that if a civilian disguise gets in there in the restricted area, they are a spy. Civilians will not get into that guard room and try to sneak around. So you might want to disguise yourself as a guard. But if you take a guard disguise, it has a feedback. You will be visually changing into that guard as you disguise. So if someone is in the vicinity and see you takes that disguise, they'll know you're a spy. So you have to be careful when you take that disguise. If you enter a room without changing disguise, NPCs are going to warn you. This is what we call scolding. So they're going to scold you, and it drains your cover bar until it blows your cover and you're revealed as a spy. It will attract guards that are nearby. So there are PvE guards that can be attracted by the fact that you just shot or you got your cover blown. They're going to go and investigate that. And the idea with guards is that there's that PvP VE kind of aspect to it, but we didn't want the guards in themselves to be kind of a challenge. We wanted them, they're kind of a nuisance. You brought your cover, they're going to shoot at you. They're very stormtroopers-y. They miss a lot of shots, but they can hit you. They will hurt you, but they're not the main menace. I think the main idea is that now you got guards shooting at you, shouting, "Hey, there's a spy!" And other players could hear that and use that as a cue to jump in and kind of third-party you and take you out of the equation. So I think guards are, the idea is that the threat from kind of not blending in with the environment and being suspicious, we find it much more interesting when it warms other players that are blending in correctly. They can take that cue and move in on you and attack you. So that's how we kind of designed it. We wanted players, if they conform to kind of having the right disguise to the right place, they act like NPCs and they play very well. They can be extremely low profile and very hard to pick out for other players. But you could also be extremely aggressive, and as soon as you hear guards shooting at someone, you're, hey, there's a spy, you follow those guards and you take that fight to kind of take them out. So that's, we wanted the NPCs in kind of the room to be part of that sandbox of just creating risks. We need players to take risks so that they compromise their cover, that they look suspicious. So we build a lot of elements that are like, this would be very beneficial to you, but it's a huge risk. So are you taking it? And I think that's what we want to do, is that good players at the game, they don't just walk all the time and play NPC all the time. They know when to take risks. They know that they turn that corner, there's nobody, I'm going to run for it, take that key card and get in there. And I think that's kind of the fun kind of duality of things, is that knowing when to play very safe, and then you turn that corner and you're in full spy mode, you take stuff, you take someone out, and you grab that and you get back out by walking. And I think that's kind of the fantasy we want to enforce, with that kind of those small pockets of, this is a restricted area, if you see someone in there might be a fight. It's more of a closed off area where fun stuff can happen.
And I do wonder, because like a game of this nature where everybody's job is to remain hidden and try to like keep that cover up as they go, how do you keep players from playing too passive? Like, is there any particular how do you spur them towards the goal and keep everyone from basically camping until somebody basically makes a move?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a few things, and that's something we've been working on for the entire project. And I think there's still stuff that we change from time to time to kind of keep that momentum. So the hard part, like you've said, is that we want players to be able to play very stealthy. And I think that's something that's fun for newcomers, is that they can be relatively safe, or much safer, just by playing kind of more of a toned down style and learn the game, instead of going all out and putting themselves in danger. The idea is that we added some advantages, and there's of course resources that you gather in the game. So you get what we call field upgrades, which are kind of small dead drops, kind of chests left by the agency that you can hack open. You get those, and those are kind of passive benefits that you have for the entire match, and they can be very powerful. So you can get, for example, much more ammo, or you hack much faster, stuff like that. So you want to go and get that to get that upper end as you get toward the objective. And the idea is that having the objective itself is a huge advantage. You can see, so the objective, once you have it, you have kind of a bubble around you, that if a spy enters that bubble, you know that they are a spy, and they know that they are inside that bubble. So you have information that nobody has from the moment that you carry the objective. At that point, you are one man against the bunch, because everyone wants that objective, but you have much more information than anyone else. You can see that those are two spy, I'm going to play them against each other, I'm going to blow that guy's cover, and they're going to see each other, and I'm going to step away and kind of move away with that objective. So having the objective is very powerful. That's something that we've always kind of, from the beginning of the project, nobody wanted to take the objective. There was no inherent advantage except that you needed it to win. And the more we moved away, is that, okay, having the objective itself should have kind of a power advantage. You should feel powerful. If you get to be the first to get that objective, you should have kind of a certain form of power. And in our game, I think a very seductive form of power is information, because you're never sure who is what. So having information and being able to know, this is a spy, and I know it because I have the objective, feels extremely powerful, and that's kind of a big incentive to get the move on and get that objective. The other thing is that the person with the briefcase, they can call the extraction, and there are multiple extraction points, so they kind of set the tone of where the match is going to end. They can kind of skip people and get to an extraction point. It takes 30 seconds for the car to get there and extract you. So they kind of set the pace for the entire final phase, that person that has the objective. So it's kind of something that we drive. You kind of want that briefcase first. It really makes your chances much higher of winning. But also in the first phases, we have a lot of mechanics that we worked on that are just to arouse suspicion. Grabbing ammo is going to leave a open ammo kind of crate with nothing in there. So if someone's there and see you grabbing ammo, it is going to show up. Some characters can sniff, that box of ammo can be sniffed, and I can kind of see proofs of where you went and kind of sniff them and try to tail you in that sense with some characters. I think there's a lot of stuff, and some gadgets are very geared toward finding other spies, setting traps. Like the act trap, you can actually trap computers, you can trap healing stations and that kind of stuff. And if someone interacts with them, they are pinged for a few times, and you can go and get that person. So I think someone could play very stealth, but someone on the other side could play with a build that has a lot of tools to fish for spies. So there are some ways to get spies. Even someone that plays very stealthily is going to have to deal, I think, from time to time with some mechanics that make them, unless they do absolutely nothing, but at that point they have no ammo, they have no field upgrades for the end game. So I think that's how we balance it, is that you want to gather some of that stuff to stand a good chance at getting the objective and making the objective itself something that you want to get for the power that it has.
And I do want to ask, because like it's such a common occurrence and especially multiplayer gaming nowadays, and especially with a game like this, you need a player base to like sort of to not only give life to the game but also like guide the random players will tell you more about what's unbalanced than than you might ever find out on your own. And I have to wonder, like, do you have any plans to go into early access with Deceive Inc. or have betas or alphas to sort of get that feedback from the player community?
So we did have a very closed alpha a few months ago. We'll have another one this summer. If I'm not wrong, we'll have a alpha sign up on our site by the time that the trailer hits, so people will be able to sign in for the next alphas. So we will have more alphas. We'll have a closed beta probably. We won't go into early access, but we will have those kind of bigger and bigger kind of window of opportunity to get player feedback and address balance. I think it's been very helpful for the times we've did it so far. So of course we're gonna keep doing it. And yeah, with the multiplayer game, even when it launches, the balancing is not done. It's never going to be done. We're going to have to look at what is too strong. Our players use those tools for themselves, and then we can see what they do with it. I think a very kind of big thing that we've been looking into is that we don't want to break. I think some of the stuff that didn't be done with some of the gadgets is really fun and really cool, and I think we don't want to remove fun stuff. We just have to make sure that it's not oppressive stuff that ruins the experience of other players. But definitely we're always on the lookout of, this is not an intended behavior for that gadget, but it's really fun and it's really cool. So there is no harm in that if it's interesting. We just want to keep an eye out, like you said, just making sure that the balancing is, this character is just the most played character or is way too strong. We need to keep a tab on that. So one thing we've been looking into is having more analytics for our next alphas, our next beta, for the beta onwards, so that we can have so of course we get feedback, and feedback is super useful, but having kind of those numbers and being able to see them and look at them sometimes doesn't tell the same story, or tell a similar story but not exactly the same, and you can kind of infer, okay, this feedback is kind of on point, but maybe that's not the entire problem. So yeah, that's something we want to do. And of course, like I said, there will be an alpha sign up pretty soon with the trailer.
With a game like this, obviously the core tenet of it is going to be multiplayer, like players going against other players, but will there be options for players to also maybe like train up, figure out what loadout works for them offline, maybe play against bots or anything like that?
So we do have so there is a tutorial, of course, that's kind of made for that, but there's also a training range that allows you to swap your characters, swap your gadgets, have a spy bot that you can fight against and just kind of try stuff with them. Training range where you can try all the different weapons at the different ranges. So there's a few stuff that we put in for players to kind of theory craft some builds and try some stuff out. We'll also have some custom games that you can create a custom game. Nothing could stop you from like starting a game yourself or with just a friend and kind of running around the level and trying stuff together or looking at stuff. We don't have kind of a dedicated single player mode, but we do want to offer kind of more variety of how players host their own game, or just kind of having the training range to try stuff out in a very kind of efficient way of just trying different builds very quickly. So that's something we're looking at for a bot game. That's probably not something we'll be able to do for launch, but that's something we are very interested in, and we did put some time into bots for the tutorial. So that's something that we have kind of a part of the work done, but it's probably not something that we'll have at launch. But definitely, if there is interest in it, we do have interest in it internally. It's just kind of a question of, with the kind of game of making good bots for it is very complicated. How do you kind of infer that the bots could be suspicious of you and that kind of stuff? That's super difficult. Yeah. When you of getting into that kind of player mentality for a bot. super interesting to us as a kind of avenue, but not something that's realistic in a shorter term for us to figure out.
And where can people find out more about Deceive Inc? Like, what the latest going on with the game?
So we have our Discord that you can join in. We are very active in it. We love to answer questions. That's also kind of the best place to be in for future alphas or stuff like that. We've been in the past, like in our smaller alphas, we would kind of look with the people on Discord first, and then look a bit larger afterwards. But yeah, we really like to be close to the community and listen to what you have to say and talk with them on that. Otherwise, we'll have a site up by the time the trailer is up, so you'll be able to get some news on that. And also on socials, we'll have some news coming in, some new trailers, new stuff as we announce more of the content of the game in the following months.
All right. Well, I think that's everything that I've got. Is there anything else you want to say to close things out?
Well, thank you. It's really good to have the opportunity. We're super happy to be able to talk about the game. Like, we've been working on it for so long and kind of in secret, so it's super nice to finally be able to show a trailer, talk more about the game. So yeah, we'll be showing more things off, and I'm very excited to show some of the stuff that we haven't been able to show yet. And yeah, thank you for having me.